Welcome everyone to our virtual tour for the day. So real quick, let me get into my presentation and we will begin. So, all right. So today we are doing our conversations with Sara Chapman of Media Burn Archive. Very, very excited about this conversation we're going to be having here today. Real quick, if you are unfamiliar with Chicago Detours, we are a tour company and we've been around for 10 years bringing people to explore stories and places locals don't know. And our Zoom meeting right now is live on Facebook, and also it will be recorded and available on YouTube. So to give you a little bit of background here, I am quite excited to have Sara Chapman with us today as our co-host. So several years ago, when we were starting up Chicago Detours, we really wanted to be able to use media in ways beyond just the tour guide talking on our tours. And I discovered Media Burn Archive, and I was so excited by the historic footage that they had and the there's tons of Studs Terkel and a lot of different kinds of voices. And so if you've been on a tour with Chicago Detours, you have very likely seen a video that came from this incredible video archive. So what we're going to be doing is we've started doing these Monday conversations because we would love to be learning more about other people who interpret Chicago. We're really excited to be able to highlight all the different media beyond tours, of course, that people are interpreting, whether it's Chicago history, architecture, design, you name it. We've got a really exciting list of people that we're bringing in for these every Monday. So welcome, Sara. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. And yeah, if anyone has not done the Chicago Detours tours, they are like really, really cool and exciting.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Oh, shucks. Thanks for saying it.
So I'm going to share my screen and there we go. Sorry, my computer's a little slow, but okay. So I'm Sara Chapman, and I'm the executive director of the Media Burn Archive, which is a nonprofit organization in Chicago. We collect, preserve, and distribute documentary and experimental video produced by artists, activists, and community groups. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got involved in that and how our archive came to be and what we do, and answer any questions that you want. So this was sort of my life as I thought it was going in college. I had dreamed my whole childhood in high school about being an astrophysicist. That's Carl Sagan on the right, and I just spent all my time reading his books, wanting to be a person who would be answering these big questions about the universe, and I loved physics and astrophysics. And so my high school physics teacher went to University of Chicago, and he said, like, you should go to University of Chicago too. It's the right place for you. So I went to University of Chicago and I became an astrophysics major. And this group of kind of pretty dorky looking people on the bottom are my colleagues in the astrophysics department. We all worked for this guy, Don York, up here, who's a professor at University of Chicago. And we studied well, whatever. So I did that for about 3 years. There's also a picture of me here in college. I also drove an ice cream truck in the summer. And so I did that for about 3 years. And then I finally enrolled in an elective in nonfiction filmmaking. I'd been only able to really take physics and math classes up until that point. So finally, at the end of my third year, I took this class in nonfiction film. And I learned about all this wild stuff that had been going on in the 60s and 70s. There were all these hippies and yippies and feminists and community groups who had picked up the technology of portable videotape which became available around 1967 or so. And they started this movement called Guerilla Television. And the idea was that people using these cameras that you can see right here, these portable videotape cameras, these could be made to produce television. And so in the media environment of the 1960s, when all you had was these three major networks sort of controlling the entire media landscape and airwaves, the idea was that everyone was going to have these cameras in their house, and everyone was going to have their own TV station. Everyone was going to be communicating through moving image media. And so it was a pretty wild and experimental time, since no one had ever made video before. So people were making all sorts of things. I wanted to show you the advertisements for these because I think they're kind of cute and funny. It was really, TV could not have been made outside of a TV studio before that, with a huge camera that's bolted to the floor. So it was really the idea that this camera was going to take TV out of these studios and be made by anyone. But what really kind of excited me about it was that for the first time, women were really a major part of this movement. Previously in either like feature filmmaking, television production, even experimental film, women had never been major creators. And women took up these video cameras really sort of in equal amounts as men and began training other women to use them. And that really, really excited me. And this lady pictured in the bottom right is Judy Hoffman, who is my professor at University of Chicago. And I think Amanda's professor too. I think that's how we met, right? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, sorry. I was
okay. No, it's fine.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Judy,
absolutely.
Judy was an amazing, trailblazing cinematographer as well as director. I mean, she still is. And now a teacher at University of Chicago, and a real badass lady. And so I learned about all this stuff from her, and I decided that I wanted to write my BA thesis on video collectives in Chicago, because there was a very fascinating history of stuff that happened and was really kind of forgotten and lost, and really only existed in the minds of the people who were directly involved, whose work was not able to be seen, and there was nothing officially written about it. So Judy introduced me to this guy, Tom Weinberg, who was teaching at Columbia College at the time. That's him. And he was one of these video pioneers. And he had assembled about 4,000 tapes of work by himself and his colleagues and a bunch of people who had been making some wild video stuff. And he rented this storefront on Irving Park Road. That's it up there, pretty fancy. And decided he wanted to start an archive because he saw that this was in the early 2000s, and he recognized that although what that was being fought for in the guerrilla television movement, the idea that we were all going to make TV, that never happened, but that the internet might actually be that thing, and that the place for all this content was on the internet, where finally more people would see it than before. Previously, maybe they were only shown at community meetings or in galleries, maybe on public television, but that we needed to digitize these tapes and put them on the internet, which was really shows kind of what a radical guy he was, because when we were trying to do this, everyone was saying to us, I mean, YouTube didn't exist yet. People, did I get muted? Am I muted? No. And yeah, so, but he was saying, no, I think people are going to watch videos on the internet, which obviously is what happened. But so I started coming around to help him start this archive because I wanted to see all the tapes in order to write my my thesis. So I planned on coming around for a few months at least while I was writing it. This was around December of 2003, and I was going to graduate in June of 2004. But you know, I just kept coming around, and we gradually turned a room full of tapes into a real archive, figured out how to catalog them, digitize them, build a website, get grants, create public programming, all those things. This is our cheerful little group. We posed at the Bean, I think right before the website launched. I think the Bean had just been made. And this is a bunch of our early co-conspirators. And so, yeah, 16 years later, both Tom and I are still very involved. I'm the executive director now, and Tom is the board chair. And this is a view of our office, where we sometimes hold events, such as this Studs Place event. We recreated the, well, we created an exhibit devoted to Studs, who's very much an inspiration for people like Tom, who wanted to tell the stories of ordinary people through video and on television. And we have about 200 videos with Studs. About half of that comes from collaborations Studs and Tom did together. They produced some documentaries together and some shows. And the other half are just his appearances on TV shows or in documentaries that he donated to us before he died. And yeah, so one of the most exciting things I've done in the last 16 years was I got to produce a feature film. We commissioned 4 filmmakers, 2 Americans and 2 Russians, and those are them in that bottom left corner in the front row of that big screening. And so this was a little bit after the 2016 election, and we were thinking about all the reports that Russians had been manipulating our media and were trying to influence our election and our society. And we were thinking about how, as an archive, our role is to sort of really preserve truth and to do sort of the opposite of fake news. And so we thought, like, it would be really fun if we work together with some Russians and Americans to see what happens when we do purposely manipulate the media in our collection, and create a film that consciously explores ideas of fake news, and also thinks about the US-Russian relationship. And so eventually the film was made, and we got to go to St. Petersburg and do these big fancy screenings. This screening at the Lendock in St. Petersburg was like sold out, more than 300 people. You can see in the top, these twins were there. They dress up apparently in these identical outfits all the time. And so the film premiered in 2019, but then in May, we decided to put it online. It hadn't been available digitally yet. And there's a link at the bottom of the screen if you want to check out the pieces. What we did is we split it up into the 4 individual films by the 4 filmmakers that are each 15 minutes long. And we did a talk every day of the week with one of the filmmakers. So all of those have been recorded. And if you want to watch the films without the discussions or with the discussions, those are all available at that link. And it's pretty neat. The other thing we are doing this summer is thinking about the history of video activism. I know that probably for a lot of you, probably weren't that familiar with the Guerilla Television movement. And we want to talk to some of these video pioneers. They were often doing very radical stuff. And we've all seen in the last few weeks the power of the camera. So we want to just sort of revisit that history. And the first up will be Ira Schneider, who's a video and conceptual artist who lives in Berlin at the moment. And that will be on, bad on my slide, July 2nd, not June 2nd. But we don't have full details yet, but if you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or email, you'll get details on it. And before I stop for Q&A, because I would definitely want to leave time for that, I'm just going to show you a couple videos from our collection. They may be stuttery depending on your collection, but they're not that but they're not that long, and you should be able to understand even if they're not totally in sync. So these are just examples of what we have in our collection. They are things that are pretty timely for the moment, stuff that we've been sending out this week or last week. So the first one is with Gil Scott-Heron, and this comes from a show called The 90s that our founder, Tom Weinberg, produced. I think it was shot in 1989, and it was produced by Skip Blumberg, who's a really excellent media artist in New York.
Revolution wasn't televised in the 60s. Is it going to be televised in the 90s? Well, you know, the catchphrase, what that was all about, the revolution will not be televised, that was about the fact that the first change that takes place is in your mind. You have to change your mind before you change the way you live and the way you move. So when we said that the revolution will not be televised, we were saying that, like, that the thing that's going to change people is something that no one will ever be able to capture on film. It'll just be something that you see, and all of a sudden you realize, I'm on the wrong page, or I'm on the right page, but I'm on the wrong note. And I've got to get in sync with everyone else to understand what's happening in this country. But I think that the Black Americans have been the only real die-hard Americans here, because we're the only ones who carried the process through the process. That everyone else has to sort of like skip stages. We're the ones who marched, we're the ones who carried the Bible, we're the ones who carried the flag, we're the ones who tried to go through the courts. And being born American didn't seem to matter, because we were born Americans, but we still had to fight for what we were looking for. And we still had to go through those challenges and those processes.
So I guess I didn't say, but hopefully you know who Gil Scott-Heron was. He was a radical activist musician, and his most famous song is called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." So this clip is of Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, who was murdered by police in 1969. And yeah, he's also, this will be another short.
Black people need some peace. Black people need some peace. White people need some peace. And we are going to have to fight. We're going to have to struggle. We're going to have to struggle relentlessly to bring about some peace, because the people that we're asking for peace, they're a bunch of megalomaniac warmongers, and they don't even understand what peace means. So we've got to fight them. We've got to struggle with them to make them understand what peace means. Bobby Seale is going through all types of physical and mental torture. But that's all right, because we said even before this happened, and we're going to say it after this, after I'm locked up, after everybody's locked up, that you can jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail a revolution. Right. You might run a liberator like Eric Cleave out the country, but you can't run liberation out the country. You might murder a freedom fighter like Bobby Hutton, but you can't murder freedom fighting, and if you do, you come up with answers that don't answer, explanations that don't explain. You come up with conclusions that don't conclude. And you come up with people that you thought should be acting like pigs, that's acting like people and moving on pigs. And that's what we've got to do. So we're going to see about Bobby, regardless of what these people think we should do. Because school is not important and work is not important. Nothing's more important than stopping fascism, because fascism will stop us all. We're going to see about Bobby, because Bobby came and saw about us.
Okay, so 2 clips about revolution from 40 years ago. I'm gonna stop my sharing so that we can do a Q&A, and then if there's nothing that anyone wants to talk about, there's one other video I could show about an example of some cool video art made by youth in Chicago using our collection. I think you're muted, Amanda.
Thank you. Sorry, didn't I had muted myself. All right. So I'll start this out, and anyone else who has more questions, please be thinking of those. One thing we really want to get a personal look at kind of your practice and your approach to the archive. And to start out, I'm really curious, how do you see your trajectory as an astrophysicist? How do you think that informs what you do with the archive? If anything at all. You know, it's kind of an abstract connection.
I think they both interests came from a desire to understand the world. One of them through understanding the natural laws that govern it, and the other really comes through wanting to understand people. I think that video and film is the best way that I've ever experienced for understanding how other people think, what their experience is like, what life is like somewhere else. A lot of the footage that I've watched, even if it's been camera original, unedited footage, the really fascinating thing for me has often been not even when something happens, but just seeing like what was this space like? What were people wearing? How did they interact with each other? Just those things, those like intangibles that you can see, I find endlessly fascinating.
How, in the collection, when we're talking, it's all video, right? Is there any film as well?
There's like a small handful of film. Like in that one picture, there were some of those kinescopes of Studs Place. A kinescope is like a filmed recording of a TV show.
Uh-huh.
But in general, there's not intentionally any film, and there's probably less than 10 things.
Okay, great. And then that would make most of your archive would be from like what year until what year?
From about like 1969 and to the present. We do have digital video as well, and we're continuing to collect that.
And when you're, and I'll get into other people's questions here real quick. I'm wondering if you're spending like all day in this historic world of video from like, whether it's, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, how does that affect your present day life?
Well, I feel like the past has a lot more to say about today than everyone realizes. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the people on here, if you're interested in history, you do realize that. But nothing happens in a vacuum, and so gaining access to what happened before really helps understand the present, I guess.
Yeah. We've got a few questions about the format of the videos, like how much of the archive has been digitized?
So we've got about 4,000 tapes on our website that have been digitized. There's about 8,000 tapes in the archive right now physically, but not all of them are original. Some things are duplicates. Some things might be, just elements, like rough edits, stuff like that. But we do get new collections all the time. So to answer that, we are digitizing every day. That's sort of like the core meat of our work, is that digitizing, cataloging, all that behind the scenes, sort of boring library stuff is what keeps us going.
And your library of videos is all free, accessible to the public, right? It's just for donation?
Yeah. So everything's available for free on mediaburn.org. We also have a YouTube channel where we put shorter clips, as well as social media. So anyone can watch anything on there. The only thing where there is a charge is if like a company like HBO, Showtime, whoever wants to license material to make a new program, which does happen pretty regularly. If anyone saw The Last Dance on ESPN, we license footage to them. The Hillary documentary that was on Hulu, stuff like that. But yes, free. Teachers, students, researchers, everybody uses them and watches them.
And then this is an interesting question. How much are you involved with footage of recent protests or any sort of archiving of that?
Well, that's a good question. So it's really, we're not the filmmakers. Some people who are filmmakers are on this call. I can see them, like Tom Palazzolo and Mirko Papadic. But so it kind of depends on the people we're close to, what they've chosen to shoot. So like Bill Stamets has gone to a bunch of recent rallies and shot stuff, like the Trump rally, the Trump rally, and then the protests against Trump appearing here. So we have that. We haven't coordinated anything in the last few weeks just because that's been crazy and life's been kind of insane. But we do try to collect that stuff, and we're welcome to, if anyone has shot stuff, to adding that. We would love to have it. We also have a project this summer where we have 2 high school students and 2 college students who are going to be just documenting the summer of 2020 and the life, whatever stories they choose, really. One student is in China, and so she's going to be sort of looking at how China opens up or maybe doesn't open up from coronavirus. I was talking to her on Thursday, and she said everything was rosy and opening up, and then Friday in Beijing, there was all the new cases. And I have a student who's in the Belmont-Cregan neighborhood of Chicago, where they've been a lot of clashes between the Latinx community and the the white community, the Latinx community has been disproportionately affected by coronavirus, and the white community has had a bunch of these evangelical churches that have been defying the stay-at-home orders to hold services. So she wanted to document that tension, and so we're going to be actively collecting the stories of this summer, at least, and whatever the students want to document.
And when someone contributes footage, do they retain the rights to it?
Yeah. I mean, it varies. So sometimes we own the rights, but yes, usually they maintain the rights. And that's why the stuff is not public domain, for example, and that's why you can't use it in a commercial production for free, because a filmmaker still owns it.
Got it. Just want to make sure I've got everybody's questions here. How do you feel video activism has changed from when you had to be a camera person who knew how to use a camera versus now, where everyone has a camera?
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, that is great. I think that's what this whole movement was about. But it also means, from an archival perspective, it's a lot more difficult to keep up with the volume of material that's out there. And it's a lot harder to, it really needs to be curated. It's very hard to sort through. I mean, yeah, I mean, our job going forward, even trying to collect digital materials, is just, it's a challenge dealing with the volume of material that's out there. But it's also great that everyone now can make their voice heard so easily. And I think someone asked about the catalog. I think that this is online. I just did a talk a week ago with Chicago area archivists that is literally just me walking through our database. So if that's something that you care about, which not many people do besides archivists, I think through Chicago area archivists, there's a recording that you can watch if you want to learn all about the database.
So one last question for you. Has there ever been a hidden, forgotten piece of footage, like a VHS tape with no label on it, and kind of, you know, you put it in the player and uncovered some other topic or space, or just some you know, hidden gem of the archives that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, I think surprises like that happen a lot because people were very bad at labeling. Some people were very bad at labeling things. But it doesn't even have to be, okay, so I do have an example of that. But I was thinking of one thing first. In a film by Tom Palazzolo, who's on the call, the Chicago Reader, so it's footage of white nationalists march, the Nazi marches in Marquette Park in 1978. Late 70s. Mm-hmm. And the Chicago Reader figured out, like 10 years ago, Tom didn't know this, we didn't know this, that Rahm Emanuel was one of the counter protesters. They recognized him. He was shirtless. He was like 19 years old. Wow. So that was crazy. But the other example I was going to say was that in digitizing a bunch of collections, Chicago State University had a bunch of recordings of like events that had happened there. And one thing that our archivist digitized was he found footage of Kanye West performing in a cafeteria when he was like, I guess in college or high school. He was like 18, 19 years old. He was performing for like 4 people in the cafeteria at Chicago State, which was pretty exciting to find. And obviously that was no one knew who that was when that was shot, and it wasn't labeled. So.
Wow. All right. So we are going to wrap up here. One last thing to share with you is that we are encouraging, if you love what Media Burn does, I just am putting here into the chat how you can donate. I love too that they say, you know, here you go, $500 can help them with rent. That kind of a thing. And then also too, the recording for this will be on our YouTube channel. Please make sure to subscribe when you watch. And of course too, we really appreciate donations. Your $200 to $200 donation allows us to keep offering these free virtual tours, and I will put the info into our chat here too. Let me show you what is coming up in the world of Chicago Detours. We have more free virtual tours tomorrow is going to be really fun. World Detour to Sicily. We've got Chicago Writers Wednesday. Our architecture series continues on Thursday with the Gilded Age. We're going to do some baseball, which of course means beer, but also curses. And we've got Hidden Architecture of the West Loop this Saturday. And then we have a virtual boat tour on Sunday for Father's Day. So all of that, all more fun. So ultimately this was, I wish we could have had like hours to talk about this, because I'm so excited about what you guys do and so appreciative of being able to use this footage on the tours and help share it with the world, because there's some really incredible messages from the past in these videos. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much, Sara, if you have any other concluding words.
Oh, just thanks for coming, and nice to see you, Aunt Nancy and Mariella and Mirko and Tom and all of you new friends of mine.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sara. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.